That's one of the brilliant things about Diablo. The name of the game gives you the goal. You don't even really need to know anything other than to read the box. Other RPGs at the time had just buckets and buckets of story in your face, story. Brevik may have seen the importance in placing gameplay first, but that doesn't mean that Diablo's story had been sidelined. Surprisingly, it's far deeper than you might think, perfectly supplementing the complexities of the lore additions in Diablo 2 and forming a basis for the retcons and world-building changes brought into Diablo 3 onwards. For the sake of this retrospective, I will be referring to the lore in how it pertains to this first game, although I will make brief mentions of any big plot changes to help viewers who may be better acquainted with those later titles. As mentioned, the manual goes well beyond the Call of Duty, adding in all sorts of wonderful illustrations of game characters and thorough storylines. This isn't a doc you should briefly glance at and toss in a drawer, even though you can because the game's uniquely intuitive for its generation. The in-game narrative is spread to the player from the words of the townfolks, but it is limited depending on who you are talking to and generally communicates only what the player needs to know to progress their current quest, with exposition not given much importance, which is fine given the game's design, but it mars the player's comprehension of the story as a result. Littered throughout this impressive 78-page booklet are quotes from those living within the world of Sanctuary, usually dark and given from a few Easter egg characters. These ancillary passages are wonderfully written and lay the foundation of Diablo's gothic world before the customer has even placed a CD into their disk drive. The lore is broken up into 4 sections: the character backgrounds, the nature of magic, the Bestiary, which we have already mostly covered, and the Librarius Ex Horadrim, 2 ancient books written by the Order of the Horadrim on the events that led up to the game's opening: Heaven and Hell, the Great Conflict, the Sin War, and the eventual darkening of Tristram. The Warrior. I find it interesting in reading the character backgrounds that the classes are always referred to as a plural. You are not a singular warrior. There are many warriors that just so happen to have similar backstories to yourself. This both leaves your own origin fairly vague so that the player may imprint whatever motive they want onto their character, while also facilitating the multiplayer. A team of 4 warriors isn't a bunch of clones, instead being a group of combatants that share a skill set, and even then the paragraphs often give contrasting reasons for your character being in Tristram. For example, many of Condurus' warriors have joined King Leoric's army, being sent to battle against the northern kingdom of Westmarch. As these warriors returned home, they found the kingdom in shattered disarray. What warriors hadn't served for Leoric still found themselves drawn to his old capital, as dark rumours of the king's mysterious demise and the evil that lurks within his cathedral have drawn many seeking fortune and glory. The backgrounds even account for failed runs and the lootable bodies we can find in-game. Though they were warned by the people of Tristram, a few of the warriors who ventured into the chaotic labyrinth have never been heard from again. This too explains the butcher's victim we can find outside of the church. It's unlikely that this survivor was from Lazarus' raid with the townsfolk. That must have happened a considerable amount of time ago, at least enough time for Wirt to recover from his wounds and for Farnham to fall deep into alcoholism. Whether the warriors are driven by valor, honor, madness, or greed, new adventurers arrive in Tristram every day, ready to challenge the dark unknown that awaits them beneath the earth. In-game, we are just one of these many warriors that aim to earn their stripes in the caverns beneath the cathedral. We aren't special in any way, and we certainly aren't the exiled prince of the kingdom as the warrior later becomes through retcons. And I'll say here that I'm okay with retcons like that when they have been accounted for, which in this case they have been to a degree. You can play one of the hundreds of random warriors from Leoric's army or who were drawn in by rumors, and it's only the one that defeated Diablo that just happened to have the backstory that leads into Diablo 2. This is the rare occasion where a retcon isn't necessarily retroactively changing history, as the history has been written in a way that it inadvertently allows for the change, even if it does mean that whenever you beat the game, your warrior is now forced to be Aiden. That's the complaint I have. Aiden is one of the many warriors you can be, until you defeat Diablo, then you have to be him, a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. Of course, if you play the game without any knowledge of Diablo 2, then none of this matters anyway. An issue does present itself as the player launches into Tristram for the first time. Ogden will greet us as a returning resident, having seemingly lived in the town before the Dark Times. Narratively, the player returning to Tristram aids in easing us into the game. Had we been an outsider like Adria on the outskirts, the other residents would not be so friendly. They make it clear through their rumours of the witch that they have grown wary of foreigners, hence they would be unlikely to so gladly aid us in our adventure. By returning home, it gives the player a narrative reason to care about Tristram beyond its utilitarian nature, and insulates the arguably overly helpful NPCs from scrutiny. The problem, however, is that if the player character was once a resident of Tristram, then that in-game fact is at direct odds with the manual. The manual only refers to the warrior as having hailed from there, and even that isn't written in stone. Further still, adverts for the game claim vengeance, power, intellect, and magic. These are the tools you will need to battle the Lord of Evil, Diablo. Vengeance for whom? Tristram? Leoric? Mankind? It's never explained. And according to the Diablo preview packaged with Warcraft 2, our hero is returning to discover what killed their family. It seems that at one point there was to be a central subplot of the game based around finding out who our family were and why they died, which actually alludes to the Diablo 2 retcon. Game canon is ever changing and may as well be personal opinion for all the good accepting everything as canon does. A popular method for game canon is to only consider in-game occurrences as canon, which is fair, it'll remove that text of the adverts from muddying the water. But where does the manual sit then? The majority of Diablo 1's lore is found within these pages, and the future games build upon this, not to mention that a ton of the auxiliary lore for the sequels is itself relegated to associated novels and other forms of media. In reality, it's all a clusterfuck that is hard to truly pin down, which makes those retcons all the more acceptable. If the original game can't even make it clear on what is really happening, can you blame the future writers for setting some of the history in stone to aid in their own story? I certainly can't, especially when it was Metzen himself making said changes. The Rogue. Rogues and sorcerers aren't as developed as the warrior, having only a single locked-in backstory each. The rogues hail from a loosely organised guild known as the Sisters of the Sightless Eye. They train according to ancient Eastern philosophies that allow them to develop an inner sight that they may use to circumvent dangerous traps. Their guild is a mystery to the people of the West, and while it isn't actually stated that every rogue originates from the Eastern territories, seeing as they prefer to pose as travellers to avoid investigative eyes, and that some have come from as far as the Eastern Dunes, it's fair to say that they were unlikely to be a resident of Tristram unless it was briefly. Ogden doesn't explicitly state that we lived there, only that he is happy that we have returned. Perhaps the rogue's time as a wandering traveller had left enough of an imprint on the man. If anyone was to meet a traveller on a brief stay, it would have been the innkeeper. That doesn't make it clear why the others would be so warm to us though, while showing disdain to Adria, unless it's the difference of our being here. Adria is a mystery to the townsfolk, and we're a would-be hero that may save them. It's obvious who they would be happier to see. Either way, this is a lot of headcanon to fill the holes. You can try and make it make sense with enough mental gymnastics, until we reach the Sorcerer, that is. The Sorcerer, sharing a magical affinity with the witch, and with the manual outright acknowledging that they are scarce within the often superstitious and religious lands of the West, there is no reason for Ogden and the gang to be so welcoming to these men of the East. They would actually be wise to distrust the magi that have made the pilgrimage from the Far East to see for themselves the horrors. With the so-called Brotherhood of the Bestiary being one of the most dominant mage clans in the East, they have sent many of their acolytes to observe the dark events unfolding firsthand. We must assume that the sorcerer in-game belongs to this clan, as the manual continues to describe the Bestiary and their keen interest in both gathering knowledge of demons and seeing them slain. The Bestiary elders hope that their acolytes will learn the secrets of the dark evil and are excited about the possibility of discovering long-lost tomes of magical knowledge within the labyrinth. From these descriptions, the sorcerer is not the heroic individual that Tristram believes them to be, more so an opportunist here to improve his place in the clan and increase his own knowledge. If there is anyone they should be wary of, it isn't Adria, but instead this fellow. None of these disparities between the manual and the game really hurt the experience, and seeing as this is an ARPG, it's easy to overlook the narrative inconsistencies, even if they are present. And they are pretty present. An oversight can be seen in Tristram's description as a city. Even in medieval times, where a city would be much smaller than we have come to know today, it's hard to believe that Tristram, with its few houses, single religious building, and nearby pastures, would fulfill its description. Whether it was intentional or not, however, under old UK definitions, the cathedral to the north would be enough to constitute this small rural setting as a city. Similar sized towns on the British Isles have such designations due to the size and grandiosity of their local place of worship. St. David's on the west coast of Wales being a perfect example. The nature of magic section at first feels a bit hand-wavy, given a vague explanation of how mankind wields magic as a side effect of the initial war between heaven and hell. It's in the description of the spells that we can discover the compelling lore we wish to find. Take the Resurrect spell for example, which gives the history behind how mankind came to discover that such magic was even possible during a war with Mephisto. The Horadrim Crusaders saw their fallen companions rise again from the dead to continue the fight against them. They despaired at the sight until a mysterious figure in white, likely an angel, appeared before the Council of the Horadrim to teach them the secret of piercing the barrier between life and death. It's these insights that make the manual such a pleasure to read. There really isn't any way to fit this within the game other than in-game books, which doesn't change the medium, only its ease of access. This kind of lore would be a bore had it appeared as an exposition dump given by a character, but presented here as the writings of a great scholar imparting his knowledge works impeccably as a means of developing the fable of Diablo's world, without bogging down its action-focused gameplay. For those interested, such as myself, we gain a greater insight of this mysterious realm we have fallen in love with when playing, and those who don't care can ignore it without it being pushed in their face. Which is to say that I'm a huge fan of lore being obscured in this way. It makes uncovering it feel like an adventure in itself, as well as forming a community where only the mega nerds will be aware of this secret knowledge. This may sound like gatekeeping, like I'm somehow a better Diablo fan because I read the extended material, but it's not. It's more akin to how I find it so cool that this game, as with many RPGs, can facilitate so many different fan bases. There are fans that love Diablo for its horror atmosphere, those that love it for its gameplay, and those that love it for its lore. You can be a fan of all of them, or one of them, and you will still be a fan of Diablo. Again, this applies to other RPGs as well, The Elder Scrolls and Fallout being prime examples. It's a key reason why these games appeal to me. Their many layers keep them interesting as your sphere of familiarity with the IP is cultivated. The Bestiary is the reader's linear introduction into the history of Hell. A report made by the chief librarian of the Brotherhood of the Bestiary establishes the three prime evils, the brothers that rule the underworld: Mephisto, the Lord of Hatred, Baal, Lord of Destruction, and Diablo, Lord of Terror. Later becoming the antagonists of Diablo 2, their introduction isn't exactly grand, but you can envision the gears turning in Chris Metzen's brain as he was describing the demonic lords, likely imagining, to some degree, the story he would write for that sequel. In this early machination, the devils are given worship over specific levels of the Bestiary. The legions of Mephisto are driven by hatred of the living, his minions taking the shape of the walking dead, as well as the corrupted creatures formed of twisted limbs and misshapen bodies. The soldiers of Baal seek the undoing of the universe, striving for ultimate destruction. His creatures are the manifestation of the forces of chaos who seek to instill fear into mankind. The attendants to Diablo are the most formidable adversaries of Hell, preferring to wait for their opponent to display a moment of weakness before attacking, or lurking at the edges of mortal perception, hidden from view. The Bestiary even explains the recolored mini-boss sprites, where the Lords of Hell would twist their servants to best resist the powers they were facing, resulting in monsters that may share a physical shape, yet have dramatically different strengths and weaknesses. And here we are, the Librarius Ex Horadrim, where we can sink our teeth into the annals of Diablo's history. I'll be condensing these paragraphs here and giving my own insight so as to set the stage for the storyline as it is told in-game. There's no need for me to cover everything, as you can read it yourself in the readily available online PDFs if you're so inclined. Still, this section will be working as a lore overview. Separated into 2 books, they reflect the Old and New Testaments of the Christian Bible from our real world. Book 1 covers the period of time before the establishment of the Horadrim, with Book 2 documenting the recent history long after their pseudo-demise. It all begins with the Great Conflict, an endless battle that has no defined start nor end. It should be obvious, but Diablo's lore takes itself seriously. Expect many such grand concepts of hell vs heaven, with great battles spanning all of time. Since before the recording of time itself, the forces of light and darkness have been locked in eternal war. Both adversaries believe the victor to be left with free reign over all creation. It is unsurprising that both angels and demons do not falter in their infinite strife. Heaven, adhering to strict discipline, believes they can properly restore order to the realms, while hell holds that absolute chaos and anarchy is the true nature of which all should be left to follow. Through millennia of bloodshed, neither side guaranteed domination. As they sought any means to turn the tide in their favour, they simultaneously discovered the mortal plane, the dominion of man. Declaring a brief stalemate, heaven and hell waited to see which side mankind would choose to align themselves with. Mortals, though, have the unique ability to decide between darkness and light. It was this new insight that would be the deciding factor of the Great Conflict. Whoever could win over humanity could claim the mortal realm and use its leverage to declare victory. Thus began the Sin War, as the agents of both planes descended to vie for the favour of man. Disguising themselves amongst mortals, angels and demons secretly lured men to their respective causes. Hell learned that through chaos, utter brutality and coercion, they could control men through fear. Heaven saw in humanity a force for good and justice, motivating them to fight on their behalf to protect them against the demons. Often though, their strict, austere methods of pure good only angered the mortals, pushing them towards darkness. The Sin War ended not with a defining victory, but with civil war. Hell was controlled by 3 primevals. Just as the archangels of heaven needed lieutenants to carry out their will, so did the sovereign triumvirate of evil need lesser lords. Duriel, Ondariel, Belial, and Asmodan. These 4 too ruled over their own domains within the burning hells. As the primevals devoted their intensity towards controlling the will of man, the lesser evils, in their ignorance, believed that the free had grown wary of war, seeking instead distraction in the lowly mortals. Asmodan and Belial made a pact to overthrow the primevals, seeing this moment as the perfect opportunity to depose the preoccupied lords and claim hell for themselves. The Great Revolution was set into motion. The primeval brothers bonded together to repel the traitorous onslaught. Overwhelmed by numbers though, the lesser evils proved too much. As Diablo, Mephisto and Baal lay defeated, their spirits were cast from their bodies, their weakened souls exiled to the mortal plane they seemed oh so interested in. So began their dark exile. Those demons that still aligned themselves to the primevals fled the burning hells with their masters, hiding among humanity in the darkest reaches of caves and underground complexes. Mankind documents this dreadful time as the binding of the free. Before the rise of the western empires of Condurus and Westmarch, the primevals roamed the land with their legions. They were left with an insatiable hunger that brings suffering and pain to all who would not kneel before them, feeding upon the lusts of men and leaving chaos in their wake, turning father against son, mother against daughter, and overthrowing any society they came across, forcing great nations into petty wars over bloodlines. In retaliation, a secret order of mortal magi gathered to discuss how to deal with this blight. Heaven sent Archangel Tyrael in support, and together they devised a plan. The sorcerers, with their enlightened abilities, would hunt the denizens of hell and imprison them to end their vicious rampage. The order became known as the Horadrim, Demon Hunters. Formed from a diverse merging of all the mage clans of the East, they employed powerful magical disciplines to encapsulate the Lords of Evil into potent artifacts called Soul Stones. Mephisto and Baal fell first, both buried deep beneath the swirling dunes of the desert to hide them from prying eyes. The power of hatred and destruction removed, peace soon returned to the land, yet the Horadrim failed to uncover the Lord of Terror. For decades they tirelessly searched, but their efforts bore no fruit. Diablo was a master of the Shadow Realm, capable of invisibility and hiding in plain sight. He evaded capture time and time again. The Horadrim followed stories of anarchy, stalking rumors of villagers thrown into turmoil over haunted dreams and evil thoughts. Taking them deep into the western lands of Sanctuary, an expedition led by Jared Kane finally cornered Diablo, imprisoning him in the last of the Soul Stones. They carried the stone with them to a secluded cave in the land of Condur, leaving it deep underground. Above the cave, across the river, they built a great monastery from which they could continue to safeguard the Soul Stone. As the ages passed, the Horadrim monks built a network of catacombs beneath the monastery to house the early remains of the martyrs of their order. With no quests left to undertake, generations passed and the Horadrim slowly dwindled. The once powerful order faded into obscurity. In time, the monastery too fell into disrepair. With it, the dark secrets its passageways hid lost to time, none aware of the pulsing red gem that bides its time at the labyrinth's heart. Entering in the book 2, we continue after the fall of the Horadrim Order in the Western lands. Over time, the peoples of the East reached westward, settling the lands, establishing their own small kingdoms. Over time, these grew into the kingdoms of Conduras and Westmarch, both peaceful to each other, standing atop a strong alliance. Within Conduras, as more land was settled and more towns popped up, it wasn't long until that abandoned stone monastery was discovered. Around these ruins, the village of Tristram grew. Around this time, a new religion was spreading throughout the West like wildfire. It was the Church of the Light, also known as Zakarum. Founded in the Far East, it implored its followers to embrace the light and forsake any darkness that lingered within their souls. With time, the great northern kingdom of Westmarch adopted the religion as their sacred mission in the world, imploring their neighbors to follow suit and embrace this new beginning. It's at this point that one should consider that the writing within the Librarius Ex Horadrim may not be factual, not only embellishing certain stories but also forgiving others, as the next renovation doesn't quite make sense. Championing the Church of Light, a northern lord known as Leoric marches in the Conduras, claiming himself king in the name of Zakarum. And that's it. I mean, the book does mention that the people of Conduras were not pleased with being placed under a foreign king, but am I to believe that no one opposed this? Not one bit of opposition? It's awfully convenient. Yes, Leoric brought with him his knights and priests, among them being his Archbishop Lazarus, so perhaps the local population surrendered. Who knows? Either way, this possible propaganda does begin to paint Leoric in a good light, declaring how the people grew to respect their new sovereign for the justice and might he served them with. Leoric made Tristram his seat of power and established the ruined monastery as his new cathedral to house the practitioners of Zakarum, renovating the building to how we see it in-game. Not long after the events I covered during the Lazarus quest section, Diablo, still trapped in the Soul Stone, has managed to start leaking power from the gem to manipulate the worlds around him. From there, his demonic will seeps into the minds of Leoric and the Archbishop. Leoric, a more righteous and steadfast man than Lazarus, is able to sustain the nightmares. Although his demeanor does change for the worse, he is not so easily swayed. Lazarus, on the other hand, becomes possessed, drawn down into the catacombs and caves into the Soul Stone's domain below the cathedral, finding himself faced with the glowing red Soul Stone hidden away all those centuries ago. Against his will, he smashed it to the ground, shattering the artifact into pieces and releasing the Lord of Terror's spirit from its imprisonment. Further weakened by the years locked away, Diablo was in dire need of an anchor to the mortal realm if he wished to attain anywhere near his great power he once wielded as a prime evil. He kept his focus on Leoric, steadily twisting the noble king's thoughts and emotions. The king put up a good fight, believing himself devout enough to exorcise the corruption that grew within, but he was sorely mistaken. In time, Leoric's honor and virtue was burned away as his retinue grew wary of their rapidly devolving king. Leoric's once rugged and proud demeanor grew distorted and deformed as he became increasingly deranged, ordering the execution of anyone that dared question his authority. He would even send his knights to terrorize his own people in an attempt to maintain order, as Kandurus sunk into a police state. It was then that he became better known by the peasantry as the Black King. His madness grew more obvious, and his closest friends and advisors became alienated. As tensions grew among his council, Lazarus devised a cunning plan to remove the cabal that tried to keep their king pure. This is all obviously inspired by Tolkien's Grima Wormtongue and his conniving control over Theoden, who thought the evil penetrating his soul. Leoric's story plays out similarly. Lazarus's whispers convinced the king that his old home to the north, Westmarch, was plotting to dethrone him. Entirely manipulated, Leoric declares outright war, appointing his council as generals and commanders and sending them, along with his knights, to march upon the northern kingdom. Some of these knights would become the warrior class described earlier. The desperate ploy of Lazarus had succeeded in sending many of the king's troublesome advisors to their certain deaths. With their absence, henceforth began the darkening of Tristram. Diablo used his full might to overwhelm Leoric. The Black King still clinged on to what little light remained, his lingering soul battling the darkness that was Diablo's possession. The demon knew that he could never attain his full strength if a glimmer of light continued to eat at him from within. And so, Albrecht, the young prince, became priority number one. As the battered knights led by Lachdannen returned home to slay their king for treason and bring him to justice, Diablo seeped into the boy's soul. Working alongside his new master, Lazarus kidnapped the youth, dragging him into the blackness of the labyrinth as Diablo flooded the child's defenseless mind with the essence of pure terror. In comparison to his father, the Lord had taken easy possession over the young Albrecht. To complete the ritual, Lazarus had to physically bind Diablo with the prince. Taking a piece of the shattered soulstone, he raised up the dagger-like shard and pierced it deep into the boy's brow. Paralyzed with fear, he could feel the demonic presence torturing him from within. A lustful hunger consumed the demon. Worked up from his failed bout with Leoric, he sated his rage and Albrecht's weakness. Reaching deep into the subconscious, he ripped from within the child's greatest fears and nightmares and gave them life. Fire rose up, surrounding the prince as disfigured forms spawned around him. The most unholy, writhing vestiges of pure evil, pulled straight from his own mind, now populated the catacombs he was stuck within. All of the monsters that he had ever imagined became flesh and bone. Even the ancient skeletal corpses of the Horadrim arose from their archaic crypts and lumbered off into the red-washed corridors beyond. The ancient catacombs themselves twisted as his imagination gained corporeal form. The borders of the mortal realm warped and teared so that the burning hell itself seeped into the world of man, taking root at the base of the labyrinth, the perfect domain for Diablo to plot his conquest. When the time was right, he would venture once more into the mortal world to free his captive brothers Mephisto and Baal. The primevals would be reunited, and together they would reclaim their rightful place atop of hell. The reign of Diablo brings us straight to the beginning of the game. It hasn't been long at all between the events at the end of Book 2 and the start of our adventure. Enough time for Wirt to recover, but not enough time for Deckard Cain to give up hope on Albrecht. It's difficult to pinpoint an exact timeline, and unless we postulate that perhaps Cain is in shock and refusing to see reason about the true fate of the prince, I have to assume it's been a month at most. Even then, it's hard to believe that Cain truly had faith that the prince was still somehow alive. But then again, one can argue that he has yet to come to terms with Lazarus's betrayal. Tristram quickly fell into a lifeless town. Travelers and fleeing villagers were accosted by the Fallen Ones and other evil creatures on the surrounding roads, and rumors grew of poor, innocent people being murdered or abducted at night. We can see this ourselves in the opening cutscene, as an arriving warrior investigates an abandoned abode. With no king, no law, and no army left to defend them, many of the townsfolk began to fear an attack from the things that now dwelt beneath their feet. It was with this fear that Lazarus was able to raise the mob of remaining residents to form the doomed blitzkrieg into the cathedral. The few who survived the horrible fate returned to town and recounted what they could of the ordeal. Their wounds were terrible, and even the skills of the healer could not save some of them. Deep beneath the foundations, Diablo gorged himself upon their fears as he began to harness power from their darkening souls, smiling to himself in the sheltering darkness, for he knew that the time of his final victory was fast approaching. Until we show up. With the scene set, it's time to experience the story as it's told in-game, remembering that for many players they were entirely ignorant of this grand backstory, even if it was only hidden in the manual. Psych, there isn't one. No, really, all of the story as told in-game has already been covered in this video elsewhere. The side quests don't pertain to the main narrative, and the main quest story thread begins with Ogden and doesn't pick up again until the Lazarus quest. We can stumble upon the excellently voice-acted books within the dungeon, but these only recount abridged versions of the lore from the manual. The in-game story is barely a story, and that's all you need for a simple action RPG. All of the backstory in the manual was warranted for lore fiends like myself, but as I've already said, it would bog down the game. They didn't want to stunt the player's murder spree and quest for more powerful loot with hours of dialogue. The small passages we do get from each character in regards to the quest is the ideal amount to keep us interested without threatening to overwhelm us. Except there are some areas we can speculate on, like how the mouth of hell we see in the game isn't actually hell, the domain from which the lords Diablo, Baal and Mephisto came from. It's a manifestation of it, a home from home created by Diablo to mimic his creature comforts, but it's not the location itself. Hell cannot be so easily accessed by just digging down. There's also that ending to consider. Diablo is using Albrecht as a host. Are we to believe that he is satisfied with this? Millennia of entrapment and he'll settle for a sickly child? No, this is only step one. I posit, based on the events of Diablo 2, that Diablo's entire ploy here is to entice a stronger host to claim his soul. Diablo is aiming for someone to steal his soulstone. He wants to be defeated. Does this perhaps explain his lackluster boss battle? Yeah, there's a lot of headcanon here, of course, but I believe it makes perfect sense that Diablo would set a hard enough challenge, what with the infestation of the cathedral, catacombs, and caves, then truly test his new body with this conjuring of hell. If they can survive that, they're more than worthy to carry the soul of the Lord of Terror. Whoever finds and beats him needs to be as strong as they can be. It's not by chance that as soon as he possesses the Dark Wanderer's body, he immediately sets out and impregnates Adria, creating another powerful future host in the process. No doubt, Metzen & Co. had no plan for all of that at the time, but the story as implemented here helped lead to those outcomes. Let's then get to that ending, the dreadful fate of the hero after they sacrificed themselves.
The soul stone burns with hell fire as an eerie red glow blurs your vision. Fresh blood flows into your eyes, and you begin to hear the tormented whispers of the damned. You have done what you knew must be done. The essence of Diablo is contained. For now. You pray that you have become strong enough to contain the demon and keep him at bay. Fighting to retain control, your thoughts turn toward the ancient mystic lands of the Far East. Perhaps there, beyond the desolate wastes of Aranok, you will find an answer.
It's all sequel bait, given enough of a conclusion to satisfy gamers in the worst case scenario where the game flops and a sequel is never produced, while laying the groundwork needed to establish an extended storyline going into Diablo 2. Not everyone at Blizzard or Blizzard North may have been convinced that a sequel would be made, but Metzen had certainly planned for one just in case. Little if any reworking of his writing was needed going into Diablo 2, other than establishing that it was the warrior who canonically became the Dark Wanderer. He had made his job as easy as possible by instituting such a strong and well-developed world for the game to sit within, while simultaneously leaving enough elements vague so that he would not be limited in creativity had he needed to branch out and change anything. The lesser evils could be changed into mini-bosses, we could visit the dunes of the east or the northern kingdom. There was enough to work with to reward fans of Diablo 1's lore. I sadly never experienced this myself, having picked up Diablo 1 after 2 was already already out, but I can only imagine the hype fans must have felt when they saw the lesser evils they had read about brought to life on screen, or the reveal of the Dark Wanderer releasing Mephisto from his own lost soulstone. Diablo's story, as in the physical product, doesn't end here though. Davison and Associates was run by businessmen, and they weren't going to look a gift horse in the mouth as sales of their newest game release entered the stratosphere. It isn't the most fondly remembered part of Diablo's history, but it is there, even if the canon generally avoids acknowledging it. Welcome to Hellfire.